Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we talked to Jonathan Bullock about static website generation with jBake. So John is a software developer who works in the oil and gas industry, mainly on web-based enterprise systems. He's been a Java developer for about 10 years, and he used to work with VB, Classic ASP, and PHP before. His spare time is occupied by either contributing to open source projects such as jBake or ASCII Doctor, or even studying for his masters in the Open University. So welcome to The Cynical Developer, John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So we're here to talk about jBake today, and yes. This is a massive step in the opposite direction over to the dark side for me. I'm a .NET developer, and I dabbled in Java probably 8 or 9 years ago, but not done a great deal. Okay. So let's start with what is jBake?
Okay. jBake, to give it its what I describe it as, is an open source Java-based static site generator. It's also blog aware, so it can be used to generate blogs or kind of a mixture of a site with a blog. So in terms of the blog awareness, it comes with the ability to generate an Atom feed, provide kind of tag pages, that kind of thing. So that's what it essentially is. It's called jBake. There's the term bake. It's very often used to describe the process of building a static site. I think the earliest mention of the term bake was by the late Aaron Swartz back in 2002, if I'm correct. The idea behind static site generation is that you generate static HTML files from some simple text content files, and the output you then publish to something like a web server. I'll be the first to admit that static site generation isn't suitable for every site. Some sites can't be built with a static site generator. Sometimes you do need that dynamic nature, but that's not to say you can't have some element of the dynamic content on a static site. A great example of this is Disqus for comments.
Yeah, it is something I'm aware of. I've never done any static site generation myself, but I know a friend of the show, the MS Dev show, use static site generation. So jBake is an application for generating websites. Is this via the command line, or is there some nice UI that you can use?
It is all via the command line. The command line is the primary interface for building or baking a site, but it's not necessarily the only interface available. There are some jBake or some plugins for JVM-based build tools that allow you to generate your site or your maybe project documentation through as part of your build tool chain. So I'm thinking more like Maven and Gradle are the two that I'm referring to. Although the tool is primarily developed or aimed at web developers who are used to using command line tools. So for the Java developer, they'll be used to using Maven, Gradle, or even something like Yeoman, or web designers who are used to using command line tools such as Bower or Grunt or Gulp, etc. Being command line based, it also allows jBake to be used directly on servers. For the Linux world or Linux world, headless is usually the preferred way.
Right, okay. Now, for me, I'm very much a UI person. I'm a big anti-command line. I like to be able to click menus and things. It sounds like a very, very hard way to produce a website through the command line. Now, is it based on some sort of templating engine? Do you have to do a lot of manual file editing beforehand? How does that actually work? Does it run off a database or anything like that?
It is based off command. Ultimately, it is based off text files. So you do have to create a lot of text files, but you don't have to be exclusively on the command line. I tend to work in my IDE, my Java IDE, so it's either Eclipse or IntelliJ, to create my text files, just like source code, really. But you do there is no database that your content sits in, although it's kind of a bit of an odd one. jBake itself utilizes kind of a storage engine internally, but that's just to provide knowledge of what it's done previously, so you can do kind of an incremental output or rendering. But it ultimately, you are working with text files to build your site. So yeah, it's kind of, this is where it's not always the best tool for every scenario. For certain static sites, it's a good choice.
Okay, so if I'm making up these text files, are they in something that is bespoke for jBake, or are they markdown files, or are they templating files themselves, or are they two different things?
There's kind of two sides to it. For your content files, you can use just plain HTML if you choose. You can use Markdown. It does support Markdown formatted content. Very similar to other static site generators, you do have to provide kind of a metadata header. It's a few lines just to give the tool an idea of what this content is, how you'd like it to be utilized. The templating side is more for the output. So jBake supports a number of different template engines. So depending on what your preference is, we've got FreeMarker, Timeleaf. We've got Jade, we've got Groovy, the language. We support a number of their templating engines. So depending on whether you like markup tags or not, you've got a template engine to suit your need. But that's more for the output, less for the source content.
Right. So if I was to do, or if I was to make a page and I declared it all in markup, that is markup within a certain area within my template rather than the actual page itself.
Yeah, you can do it that way. The content depends on what that you want that piece of content to be. It could be a page in itself, or it could be something such as a blog post, which is something that you would consider to be a element of a page. So say, for example, your index or your homepage of a blog is, you're going to want to output X number of blog posts on the homepage. So those content or pieces of content or posts, they would be a file in your source folder, but you'd output them as part of another page.
Okay. So the system puts out purely HTML files. It's not doing something wacky and producing any sort of JSP type websites or anything like that?
No, not at all. Its goal is to output or generate pure HTML that can be served out with whatever you choose. If you want to include, obviously, it's not just pure HTML. That if you want to, most websites are going to incorporate some CSS or JavaScript or any images or some assets, as jBake calls them. But that's down to you, whatever you want to include as part of your design or part of your site.
What, if any, benefit is there to doing or creating your website this way rather than using a content management system?
Okay, there are a number of inherent benefits from using a static site generator. So these apply to not just jBake, but to any of the many static site generators. So as I said before, the output is pure HTML, so you can use any web server you like. You're not tied to any particular platform or operating system or web server. You don't even have to run your own web server to serve out the results of a static site. You can even use services such as Amazon's S3 or even GitHub itself. GitHub has very good static site support for your Git repos. That's the major benefit. Speed is another one of the other benefits. A static site is always going to be quicker than any dynamic site or a CMS based, or I think the alternative term to bake is called fried, to follow the baking or cooking line. As there's always going to be less processing involved in serving out a static site than generating the output for every request that's made to that site.
Right.
You get then onto security, because it's just serving out static HTML files, CSS files, JavaScript. You don't have to worry about any vulnerabilities in your CMS or your blog engine. Making sure you're always up to date with the latest version. It's just plain old HTML files. You could consider static sites more flexible, as you're not constrained by what a CMS or a blog engine can do for you. You've got full control. That can be a blessing or a curse depending on your point of view, but you have got full control whether you wish to do so or not. On top of those generic benefits, jBake also allows you to write your site content in a number of formats. As I said before, there was plain HTML, there's Markdown, and we also support the quite powerful ASCII doc format, which is, I'm a big fan of the syntax. It can be used to produce quite a few of the O'Reilly technical books have been written in the ASCII doc format. You can also store your content files, such as blog posts, in any folder structure you like. This was one of the something I found limiting when I came across Jekyll, one of the it's kind of the gorilla of the static site world. jBake also provides you with a range of template engines, as I said before. So if you really, really love markup tags, then FreeMarker or TimeLeaf is for you. If you really hate markup tags in your templates or when you're writing websites, then Jade or Groovy's template engines are more for you. So once you've got those templates or you design those templates, jBake provides you with what we call a data model. This is where the internal kind of storage engine kicks in, allows you to kind of retrieve the content or the data from your content files, and allows you to kind of do some kind of looping across your content to output should we say, blog posts on a specific page. Basically gets you access to the content or the data stored in your content files. So that's kind of the major benefits of static site generation. As I said before, it's not suitable for every scenario, but there are a lot of scenarios where I think it's the best choice.
Yeah, it's definitely seems to be, and for the likes of our podcast, I'm currently on the other side of the light side of .NET and using WordPress over in the PHP dark side, and okay. I've been looking at different options that I could use there to produce my site. I like a small open source CMS called Kubu. I use that for a lot of my sites, but the idea of these static generated sites seems pretty good. If I was to do that and start a blog for it, for instance, when I run jBake to bake my static pages, does it go through and rebake every page, or does it know that it's already done that page, that there's not any difference to that page, and it just ignores it and keeps what's currently there?
You've got a choice whether to do it, which way you want to do it. jBake, it's all configurable. You've got the option to enable kind of a persistent storage engine, which will basically hash the content of the files, and if it notices a change, it will re-render or rebake just what's changed. So if it hasn't changed, or that content page hasn't changed, it won't re-render it. So you've got the choice whether you'd like to do a full kind of complete render or bake, or whether you want to do a more incremental. It's good for when you're doing local development. It's got a built-in web server allowing you to preview what your site looks locally on your local PC. And it's got what is generally known as a watch mode. So it'll watch for any changes you make to your content files, and it will rebuild or rebake the site as you go. So as you change a content file in your particular IDE or text editor, switch back to your browser, you'll see the results of that change pretty much instantaneously.
All right. Okay.
So that if you want to do a full bake every time you make a change, that's entirely your choice, but it will take those couple of seconds longer.
Sure. So you were saying there that it's good for development that you've got this watching system. Now, I'm going to come at this from the Windows world of a Windows service running in the background that's checking that. Are you able to do that sort of thing on the server, so that you drop in your Markdown file or whichever file that you've chosen to use? You drop that into your directory on your server, wherever that is, FTP or remote desktop or something like that, and it automatically picks it up? Or should you be pre-baking it and just uploading the HTML files?
You're probably best to, I suppose the general idea behind static site generation is you do all of the generation up front and just publish what's the output. Although that's not to say you can't have some kind of system running on the server if that's what you choose. I know there are some users that have integrated, they host the source of their static site on, should we say, GitHub, and they use various like free CI systems that kind of, as they commit a change into their repository, it executes a build on their CI server, and then the results of that build or bake is then pushed back to their repository, and that's served out. So it's kind of depending on what you how you'd like to structure your deployment or baking or publishing system. You've got a lot of choices to how you would prefer it, to be honest.
Yeah, talking about putting it in with the CI stuff, that was going to be one of my next questions, because to me that would seem like the logical way to go about it, is that I would throw the markdown file up into my repo, whether it's GitHub or Subversion or a TFS or Mercurial, whatever flavor you want to use, and then my CI system comes in and goes, oh, new file, I'll build this, and as part of the build process it links in, runs jBake, bakes all the files, I guess it can push it to wherever it needs to, and I could have something like maybe Octopus Deploy pick that up and go, oh, I can push that straight out and have it upload to my server.
Yeah, it's definitely that's one of the reasons jBake has got. It's more obviously jBake's Java based, so we've got exclusive or kind of a focus on the JVM build tools such as Maven, Gradle, SBuild if you're into Scala. You've got that ability to trigger or control jBake from your particular JVM-based build tool. But that's not to say, jBake is a command line tool, so you can, as long as your build tool can fire off some kind of isolated process with some commands, so it doesn't have to be a Java build tool, as long as the build tool can execute some kind of command line process, whether it's on Linux, on Windows, on OS X, whatever you choose.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. So this is an open source package. It's not a paid for application or anything like that.
No, it's completely open source. The source code is available from GitHub under the very permissive MIT license. Some people will probably, open source developers will see that as a benefit, that you can alter the code and whatever jBake does as they want. Some people might see it as a negative, but each to their own. There are a lot of forks of jBake on GitHub, and various people I notice. Some people will contribute back to the project. Some people will alter it and to do something particular to their or particular use case, and that's entirely available to them because it's open source.
Okay, and because there's that large community, I guess that there's a lot of information out there and a lot of people are willing to give you support on it. And is that something that yourselves as the contributors offer to anybody that's using it?
Not directly. When it comes to if anyone posts anything on the if it raises an issue or posts on one of the mailing list or forum, it's either myself or one of the other contributors, or even just another user of jBake might say, oh, I've done that before, this is how you do it, or this is how you can achieve that scenario, because I've come across the same situation of what I wanted to do. But there is no commercial support offered by anyone that I'm aware of. There might be somewhere, and there are a few that I've noticed. There are a few kind of design studios around the world that have utilized jBake either for their own sites, or they've used it for a few client-based sites as well, which was they may provide support for their particular client, but it's not open to the wider community.
Okay, great. With the way that all these internet technologies go, a lot of these sort of things pop up, flare hugely. Everybody gets on board, goes, yes, this is what I want to do. This is the way it should be done, and then they sort of fizzle out and disappear. How long's jBake been around? And you've already said that it's got a lot of support, a lot of following in GitHub. But just to give anybody that's thinking maybe this is the route they want to go, that bit more confidence that this isn't something that is going to be discontinued, is going to sort of go stale anytime soon.
Okay. It's been around since 2013. I think I'd actually had the idea late 2012, but I think I published it to the internet in 2013. It started life as a personal project. As you said, you're using WordPress for the Cynical Developer website. I'd been a happy WordPress user for years and years for my own site and blog, even since before it was WordPress, when it was back, it used to be called, I think it was B2 stroke Cafe Log. I think it used to be. I think that was before it was forked and produced WordPress. But I'd been a very, very happy user. But more recently, I'd noticed every time I got a bit of traffic to my site, WordPress just seemed to drag down the whole kind of small virtual machine I was using. And I really didn't use any of the features of what WordPress could be used for. And around the same time, I came across an article by the creator of Jekyll and one of the GitHub founders called Blogging Like a Hacker. And it really struck a chord with me. It really related to how I'd create source code or create a project. And I thought, why don't I blog like that as well? It seems natural. So at that time, I looked around for a Java-based, as I'm a Java developer. I looked for a Java-based static site generator, and I was really surprised there wasn't one at the time. So as every good developer does, decides to write their own.
Yeah.
And reinvent the wheel.
But there was no wheel for you to reinvent at that point, so you were okay.
Well, people say, we should just use Jekyll or one of the other many. I think there's a few hundred out there now. I think that it depends on what you're most suited to. As you said, you're a .NET developer, so you're naturally going to gravitate to a tool that's written in a language that you feel you've got some control over and understanding of. So it's, jBake's not going to be the right tool for everyone. If you're a Ruby guy, you should be using Jekyll or GitHub Pages. It's what you'll already have Ruby installed. There's no extra hassle for you. Whereas me, I just think, don't want to install that. It'll spread, it'll install all kinds of rubbish all over, and I'll forget it's there and come across it later on thinking, what the hell's all this? So I think, the choice of a static site generator is probably going to be very much driven by your language preference. And I think you've got a very large choice, or lots of choices out there. But going back to your question, I think even though it's only been around for 3 years now, as it's open source, even if I don't, contribute as much as I can, because it's open source, the community can, take it up. It can fork it, take it in a different direction. So if there's a demand or a need, the community can always satisfy that demand. I think in the Java world, something similar happened to the Find Bugs project. The original creator was uncontactable for a long period of time, and the community decided, we want this tool, we want to carry on. So they decided to fork it, and that's one of the options you have when it is open source. The community can take something forward if the original creator or founder has no desire to anymore.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about there with that, and I think one of the big things for me is that I've always been anti-WordPress because of all the scaremongering that's around it, of how vulnerable it is, because of all the plugins that people make and they don't test them properly. And my choice to use it to get the Cynical Developer website up was simply that it had a lot of plugins that enabled me to get the site up quickly, and that was my MVP. It was out the door. I didn't have to do a great deal with it. And over the last few weeks, I've actually found myself dabbling and writing my own plugins. Now, I'm not a PHP developer by any stretch of the imagination, and what I've mainly done is hack together and hack apart other plugins that don't quite do what I need it to do, and build my own things for it. But as you said, I'm not harnessing anywhere near all the power that that WordPress is capable of, and possibly this is something that I should look at as the static side of it, because I'm looking to move the hosting to a podcast host rather than on my own dedicated server, to give me better availability worldwide. And I'm quite liking the idea of the static site after talking through it. It was one of the things that I sat down and sort of looked at this and thought, why would you even do this when you have all these CMS systems out there that you can just get into? There's a WYSIWYG editor, and some of them have got good WYSIWYG editors now, but they're still not 100%. Whereas I guess with this sort of system, you know exactly what you get. What you put in your markdown is what's going to come out when it's generated, and you've got some control over it. So I think that's definitely a good thing.
It's one of the many domains I own is something it's called gostatic.org. I think what you described there is that initial, why would you do it this way? And I think that's just an educational thing. That it's about educating people, going, this is the right way for certain scenarios. These are the perceived benefits. And I think naturally it's gonna appeal more to developers, and I think that's just because developers are used to using creating source code files. They're used to using version control systems, and that's one of the other benefits of a static site generator. You can version control your content. You know, that's something that I know WordPress has its own element to that, but it's more aligned with what a developer is used to using, the tools they're used to using. And I think the premise of static site generation, what happened to me back when in 2013, as I said, I should direct every person interested to that blogging like a hacker. That's what sold it for me. That's why I thought, yes, that's the way I want to write, or I want to compose, what I've got to say to the world. And it makes sense to use the same tools I'm used to using on a daily basis. And, for my site and for most blogs, the content doesn't change that often day to day until you've got new content. So it makes blogs almost a perfect choice for static site generation. It's not to say every site should be, but I've seen certain big media organizations. I think off the top of my head, I think Vox might have built their own kind of publishing system around one of the other static site generator. I'm thinking Middleman off the top of my head, but I could be completely wrong here. But there are a lot more people looking into it. As you said, I was WordPress gets a lot of stick, and security is one of a concern for a lot of WordPress users. But that's not to, I think WordPress has done a fantastic job of making web publishing easy. And I think, I'd congratulate it for what it's done. And, as you said yourself, you've started creating your own plugins. And I think that's what I did when I got back onto WordPress after a bit of a gap of running my own site. You just naturally think, I can do this with it. And I think it should be, in a way, it's a positive thing that it's encouraged you to alter it. There is a downside to that some people are creating plugins, as you said, that maybe shouldn't be writing plugins and publishing to the rest of the world because they're not maybe the best developer or haven't thought through what they've done. But it's for the amount of sites that are published with WordPress, it's obviously good at its job to some degree.
Yeah, it's definitely filling a hole in the market out there. And,
it's a big hole it's filling.
Yeah. And one of my good friends who I'm actually we have on the show at some point to talk about Xamarin, he will tell you that for me, if I got to pay for something, I might look at the free option. But with WordPress, I've actually been out and I've paid for themes and I've paid for plugins and things like that. So I think that's got to have me take my hat off really to WordPress, that someone like myself who, if I can't get what I want relatively cheaply, I'll go and roll my own very quickly. And Yeah, WordPress is actually it's opened my wallet and slipped out a few notes and given it to somebody else, which is a very hard thing to do at times.
Yeah.
But
I think
yeah,
that's a developer mentality, isn't it? Though
it is.
you
It is.
could,
It's always why pay for it when you can do it yourself.
yeah.
I think you've got to get into that mindset of well, how much is your time worth? Is it worth spending 70, 80 hours of your time when you could have just gone and spent 60 quid on an application that did it for you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we mentioned quite a few different systems and websites and that while we've been talking. If I wanted to go out there and learn more about it, is there any specific websites that you would point listeners to?
I think I've mentioned it many times now, but I think maybe the Blogging Like a Hacker should be the first one people or other users should check out. In terms of training or courses, I'm aware someone was working on some kind of course on static site generation. I think it was with jBake for Pluralsight. However, I've not heard of them for quite some time now, so I don't know where they've got up to with that. I'm not aware of anything else on Pluralsight at the moment, but I could be wrong there. I suppose static site generation, while it's not a new idea, it's been around. I think movable type used to generate static output from the old Perl system.
Yeah.
I think it was, but it's becoming more mainstream. I suppose as a developer of one, I've noticed it's becoming more and more mainstream. Maybe Jekyll and services like GitHub Pages, which is backed by Jekyll, has helped drive this more kind of awareness. I've also seen a couple of even meetup groups dedicated to static site generators or HTML generators pop up, one in San Francisco and one in Vienna. And there are also some good sites like thenewdynamic.org that kind of cover the topic of static sites. So they'd be a good resource to go to. I think even Smashing Magazine has an article explaining how static site generators are the next big thing. That's a good, it shows, it's a sign that, kind of major, sites are taking notice of the technique, and that maybe it's a bit more suitable for certain things. There are a couple of directories of the hundreds of static site generators out there that try and kind of cover the kind of a comparison or show you the kind of a table view of what language they're based in, what maybe open source license they're using, what template engines they support. But they're good resources if you're interested in. I haven't touched .NET or any kind of .NET development for a long time now, but I'm sure there are a few .NET ones. I have seen them about. I've never experienced them myself, but they'll just become more and more popular as people discover them and want to improve on them. So I'm sure there'll be more and more out there.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll put all the links to those resources that John's spoken about in the show notes, along with contact details for John as well, if you need to reach out and ask him anything. What is the future for jBake? Have you got anything special lined up for it? Is there any big features coming along that people need to be aware of?
I've got loads of visions for what I'd like to add to jBake. My only limit is time, I suppose, and having the time to try and do it all. My major next goal is probably to make jBake more modular and allow other developers to easily extend the core set of functionality through whether you want to call them extensions, plugins, or even add-ins. That's a major goal of mine that I've wanted to do probably for the past at least 18 months, but there's always been other more pressing, requirements. And as the person who kind of maintains it and coordinates it, I think what's the term? Is it benevolent dictator for life? I think is the phrase or term used. It's been my first open source project, jBake, so it's been a very steep learning curve for me. And I'm sure there's lots of people who are willing to say, yep, I've made a lot of mistakes in the past couple of years. But I'm looking at how I can remove myself as any perceived bottleneck for the project. So how, it can carry on even if I'm busy with whatever else I'm working on, whether it's my, 18-month-old son, or whatever it is. So I've been looking at kind of moving the project to organizations such as the Apache Software Foundation, as they force you to have much more governance and structure in your project to ensure the longevity of it. So I've been investigating, what's the process for joining, for moving the project there. And they're the things I've been or looking at the moment. Because as much as I've got lots of ideas and new features, it's always it takes time to develop them, and if I can allow other people to more easily contribute and work on those things, I see that as a benefit for the project and the users.
Yeah, sure. So it looks like it's got a bright future of it, and in a very, very static way, it's moving forward.
I hope so. Yes, hope so.
Yeah, so it looks good, and it's definitely opened up my eyes to a completely different way of thinking about generating a site. And I'm going to go away and look into this a little bit more. I've had a little bit of a look around, and as you've said, there's a few static website meetup groups that talk about it. I think I found one on YouTube. I can't remember exactly where they were based, but I know there was a gentleman on there giving a talk about jBake. So that was all good.
I think that might have been Toronto.
Right.
It's a bit weird when you come across things like that, where you'll find your little open source project has been talked about by some complete random person on the internet in another random country in the world. Yeah, it is a very weird experience.
It's definitely one of those things that feeds the imposter syndrome. If you've ever suffered with that, and I get that a little bit since, or a little bit more since doing the Cynical Developer, seeing people talking about it, and some people.
It's very surreal, isn't it?
Yeah, people that you would say were famous developers, and they run in those sort of circles, saying, "Oh, have you seen this? This looks quite good," and you think, "Oh, yeah, I know about that. It's me."
yeah, it is a very weird feeling.
Yeah, definitely. So, static sites look to be the way forward. jBake, as you said, is just one of those options out there, and regardless of what platform you're on, because it's Java, then it should work for you.
Yep. So
that's great. So we'll leave it there. I'll include all the links that we've talked about in the show notes, and we look forward to you join us again on the next show. So thanks very much, John.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform and help the Cynical Developer to grow by increasing its audience. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links and show notes for each episode.